Hi, I'm Tom Landon. The program you're about to watch was recorded live at the historic Grandin Theater in Roanoke. Since we started the Echo channel, we've made every effort to record as many Hoot and Holler storytelling shows as we can. If you appreciate seeing programs like this one and the fact that we make them available online and on demand to a global audience, I hope you'll consider supporting Blue Ridge PBS by becoming a member. These programs aren't cheap to produce, and we're actively seeking underwriting to support the recording, editing, and distribution of Hoot and Holler so that we can continue to make these heartfelt and personal tales available to those who are unable to attend them live. If you'd like to learn more about sponsorship, please drop me a line by email at tlandon@blueridgepbs.org. And enjoy the show.
Blue Ridge PBS and Echo present Hoot and Holler, a live storytelling event recorded at the historic Grandin Theater in Roanoke, Virginia.
Storyteller, another one I stalked. I did. It's true. I've been following, anyway, I saw a kind of a recent post and I just wrote him a note and I said, you have zero options now. Unless you are in Kenya, where this story takes place, you are coming to the stage. So he's called the Roanoke Valley home for 32 years, arriving in Virginia to attend Radford University in 1989. He served as the Director of Education at the Art Museum of Western Virginia, now known as the Taubman. For the last 25 years, he's been the sole proprietor of a house painting, custom wall finishes company. He's a practicing visual artist and enjoys writing essays as a way to process his life experiences, I'll say. And he routinely posts these on Facebook, which is where I began my pursuit. Please put your hands together. First-time storyteller, beautiful, beautiful, John Wiercioch.
It's 2 years ago, and I'm standing in an old church courtyard, and it's all gray, and I'm confused because on top of the high walls, there's barbed wire. We walk through a dark corridor and then a heavy gate and out into a street, but it's really more of a dirty alley. It's crowded and loud, and it's filthy, and it's smelly. I'm with two new friends, a steady, soft-spoken fellow named John Paul, and his colleague, a fearless visionary, Anne. They guide Alphagiri. It's a small nonprofit that uses the arts and it empowers orphans that are living in the slums. Two young boys run up and grab Anne by the arms as we pop out, and they say, "We'll protect you." And she smiles. They lead us deep into a confusing maze of shacks. As we wind our way in, I'm relieved to realize that I can track Anne because she's got on neon pink pants. We're in Nairobi, Kenya. It's a city of 7 million plus, and we're in the middle of a slum. How in the heck did I get here? Like most of us in this room, I suspect, I got thrown by the pandemic. I feel lucky. I wasn't sick, and I was able to keep working. But about a year in, I was getting very frustrated and beyond stir-crazy. I remember planning my regular Christmas trek to be with my mom, 93 years old in Indiana, 10 hours away, like I've done for 30 plus years. This is our pre-pandemic photo, by the way. She's living in an assisted living apartment, and she's still sharp as a tack, and she calls me ahead and says, "Don't come, I still can't have any visitors here." But always the obstinate child, of course I'm going to go see her. A decade before, she lost the great love of her life and my own great inspiration, my father. They were deeply in love for 56 years, and they were wonderful models of generosity, compassion, and unconditional love. So now I'm there outside her apartment, and I'm standing in the snow, and we're looking at each other. She's inside through her unopenable living room window, talking on cell phones. It's like a surreal prison visit with your mom. Here she is, recognized by everyone on the staff as their favorite resident at the nursing care facility. And no wonder, because she's the warmest, gentlest, most supportive soul ever for so many of us. She's lived through the Depression, World War II, has outlived all 8 of her siblings, and now she's being forced to live in solitary confinement. Our whole world seemed to have gone mad. Lots of folks are suffering at this time. We're all anxious, I get that. But I also know that few things calm me like the touch of a friend, companionship, and genuine hugs. But now we're being advised to isolate, to avoid touching, to avoid community, and not even allowed to be with loved ones on their deathbed, told they must die alone. It's unbelievable to me. I'm a nonconformist art guy, and so much just doesn't feel right. It's like fear is driving everything and everyone. Fear of the virus, fear of big pharma, fear of the government, fear of your neighbor. You name it. And all the while, we're backing away from simple things that cultivate a sense of peace and keep us vital and healthy. I've had enough. I've got to find a way to clear my head and recover my heart. An artist friend that I've been corresponding with lives in Kenya, so I hatch a plan for a getaway, with Mom's approval, by the way. Months later, after 15 hours in the air, I touch down. I'm on foreign soil, hearing unfamiliar accents, but immediately begin to feel relieved. Next image, Patrick. Nowhere's perfect. Right away, you sense there's a huge split between the haves and the have-nots in Kenya. Daily life there can be a lot less convenient than here in the US. It's more raw in a way. And in a lot of ways, it also feels more real, and I think more beautiful. I find I can breathe there, and I can hug people again. Right away after I arrive, I volunteer with my artist friend at the nonprofit that she's shared about. We do an art workshop outside the slum. It's basic art therapy of sorts, but it gives these kids a brief oasis from the trauma, beatings, and abuse that they face on a regular basis. And yet I'm stunned. Here's these orphaned, homeless street kids from terrible situations who literally have nothing, not even a home. And they're so playful and trusting and so joyful. I sit down with them to draw, and they're giggling and teasing so much that they get me laughing. They completely reframe my view. I happen to notice a quiet one across from me in a hoodie, Ibrahim. He's actually over here in the hoodie as well. And this is my drawing of him. I notice that he's doing these amazing three-dimensional drawings of vehicles straight out of his memory. I tell him they look just like things my mechanical engineer son used to do when he was young, and he smiles. I'm invited and then agree to go visit them all at their base in the slum. Next image, please. And so that's where we start off, from that church courtyard. The slum is a dense and overwhelming place in all ways. Essentially, it's a homeless encampment that's gotten entrenched over many decades. There's no infrastructure at all. There's no running water. There's no sewers. There's scant, if any, electricity, and endless metal shacks, and thousands of people. As we wander along, following these guides, from elders to infants, it seems that everyone's watching us, especially the tall Mzungu, which actually means me, the white guy. Some look at us very cautiously, but mostly they are friendly smiles. I see some glue-sniffing addicts laying here and there, but lots more, there's upright folks, selling all manner of goods, chatting, visiting, doing chores. Despite the circumstances, the misery that seems apparent, clearly people are still also trying to create a sense of home. I'll never forget walking along next to a 4-foot-high mound of the most awful, noxious-smelling heap of trash, and it's an entire block long. And more incredibly, there's people on top of it, picking through, looking for something to sell, maybe to barter, or to eat. I don't feel afraid as much as self-conscious and very, very privileged. All the while, I'm also still trying to keep track of Anne and those pink pants, which I was very grateful she had on. But my senses are literally reeling. It's overload. My brain just wants to shut down. Thankfully, her guardians finally lead us into a small, muddy space between some shacks. It's their temporary sleeping spot. They're nomads because they don't have a home, and they stay in a spot for a little bit, and then they get chased away or beaten or forced to move on. It's their base, as they call it. The boys are very excited that we've come. Somebody actually knows that they exist, maybe even cares a little bit about them. A tall, charismatic one who recognizes me and who's renamed himself, this is the truth, Bill Gates. This is Bill at the top there. Calls me over, and he schools me on the proper way to fist bump in the slum. Amid the laughter, though, I notice that a few of them have glazed looks, and they're holding their fist up to their chin. I'm told it's a rag in their hand with a few drops of jet fuel. It gives them a high, puts them in another place outside of their misery, and it takes away their hunger pangs. Then I see Ibrahim. He's also clutching his fist, and our eyes meet. I go over to him. I cajole him into showing me what's in his hand. He opens it slowly. I tell him, I know you could do better. Maybe you could toss it in the garbage trough. He hesitates for a bit, but then he does. I feel like it's my good deed for the day. I find out later in that same day that when he was an infant, the male in the household threw baby Ibrahim against a wall so hard that it cracked his skull. He was in a coma. He was in the hospital for a year and he wasn't supposed to live. He's a miracle of sorts just being alive. I returned to the U.S. A few months later, John Paul writes me that Ibrahim has asked Alfajiri folks to help him find a way beyond life in the slum. That's a crucial first step to change. They insist that he's different now, inspired ever since I got him to toss the drug rag. I can't take any credit for it, really, but I'm very happy to hear about this. They find his mother and siblings 5 hours away. He's thrilled to get to reunite with them and be back in school. He's there for a few months, and then tragically, just a short time after, his mother dies of a treatable infection because basic medical help simply wasn't available. He's devastated, and as a testament to his character, he decides and tells them he wants to quit school because he has to take care of his younger siblings now. The Alfajiri team steps in again, and they find support for them all, and he's able to stay in school. Coincidentally, at the same time, back in the U.S., I unexpectedly lose a dear brother-in-law. And just a few weeks later, my mother passes at 95, peacefully in her sleep. I write John Paul to let Ibrahim know that I share in his sorrow, and now we're further bonded by the mysterious grace of grief. More seasons pass. It's now the fall of 2023, and I just got my tickets to return to Kenya in February of 24. I get word that Ibrahim's graduated primary school, which is an incredible achievement. Given his beginnings, it's just remarkable. And I decide I've got to make the trip up there to see him. Soon after this, though, the expat artist friend, the one I've had a sustaining long-distance sharing for 3 years, toured the Kenyan countryside a bit with, the one who introduced me to Alfajiri, stuns me by writing that she has to end things and can't correspond with me anymore. We've all been there, in some form or another, I suspect. And I can rationalize it in my head, mostly, but nonetheless, my heart aches. It's one more tough adjustment yet another loss in a very hard year. I'm feeling just emotionally wrung out, and I start wondering about canceling this upcoming trip to Kenya. But then in the middle of my confusion, a sense of peace emerges, and my heart guides me. I can't abandon Ibrahim, my other Kenyan friends there, and especially those street kids. So in February this year, I returned. A few days after arriving, I make that 5-hour trip up to see Ibrahim. We leave at dawn. We pass through a dozen small towns, markets, and they're all swarming with that wonderful, imaginative, fluid Kenyan mix, this weave of trucks, overloaded vans, motorbikes piled with goods incredibly high, cars, bikes, pedestrians, and of course, a smattering of cows, goats, and chickens all crossing the road. The last roads are barely navigable, but finally, we reach his school. Next slide, Patrick. And here we are, reunited for the first time since 2 years before. Seeing him standing so tall and proud has my heart singing. We still barely know each other. It's the strangest thing. Yet somehow life has chosen to connect us. Both of us have lost loved ones. His life and mine have been radically changed since that fateful day in the slum. I'm stunned to realize he's now over a foot taller. He tells us with a shy smile that he's outgrowing all his clothes and now passing them down to his younger brother. And I have to laugh out loud because I remember doing exactly the same thing to my younger brother. But mostly now, at 16 years old, as is, I think, pretty obvious looking at the image, he's radiating confidence and joy, and I'm completely elated to see how he's beginning to blossom. He's playing soccer, and he's very good at it. He's studying welding. He hopes one day maybe even to open his own shop. He insists to us he won't let us down or himself. And all I can tell him is, that's impossible, Ibrahim. You couldn't because you've already achieved so much. He's beyond grateful to see me, and he thanks me several times for coming. And then, this miracle infant, really, who wasn't supposed to live, this abused teen, this young man who's climbed beyond his addictions and found the grit to claw his way out of the slum, only to connect with his mother and then lose her, with quiet conviction, promises me. He says he will repay my kindnesses by finding another boy who needs help. The vibe is utterly magical in that little room. I remember as he spoke that I could sense the loving presence of both my parents. On the long ride home, I thought about the incredible series of events, the completely irrational path that led me, this Detroit-born son of devout Catholics, grandson of Polish immigrant farmers, to be there in Kenya, 6,000 miles away from my Virginia home. And further, to return and make a day-long journey to this small school in a very rural place in Central Africa, sharing heart to heart with this shining, inspiring young Muslim Kenyan who beat a million odds to come back from the brink. Follow your hearts, folks. They know where we're meant to be far better than our brains could ever plan for us. Thank you, Ibrahim. Asante Alfajiri. Asante Sana. Thank you.